Hello friends, this is your friend back with a new fanfic. What if Kakashi went back in time to change the Uchiha Massacre and save Naruto? Episode 1. If you like this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Now, after losing everything in a tragic future, Kakashi is given one impossible chance to travel back in time and rewrite the darkest chapters in shinobi history before they ever happen. Now, let's start. Kakashi woke up with a pounding headache and dizzying nausea. He sensed that his chakra was behaving erratically and was confused as to the reason why. Trying to temper down the dizzying feeling, he took a deep breath whilst lying down, brought his hands together in the familiar ram sign and then attempted to control his chakra and calm it down. As he started to feel his chakra swirling around his body, he noted with confusion that his body was exuding a large amount of spiritual energy. Kakashi consciously swirled his chakra in the opposite direction of his natural counterclockwise state, attempting to impede the flow of his spiritual energy. He could feel the swirl of energy slow down as it tried to move in an unnatural direction. With time, he managed to slow down enough mental energy and expelled it outwards. The imbalance was still significant, so he set off on another round. He repeated the process over and over, allowing for the physical energy to balance better with the now lowered spiritual levels. Once the nausea started to subside as his body rebalanced, he turned his thoughts to the reasons why. Between the orange-masked Akatsuki who claims he's Uchiha Madara declaring the Fourth Shinobi War and the revelation behind the truth of the Uchiha Massacre, Kakashi knew a storm was coming and his troubled magnet student was going to be in the middle of it. Not to mention what Naruto told him about Madara being the one behind the Kyuubi attack, there were so many secrets being uncovered and they all led back to Madara. He couldn't believe the mess one person could cause. Was it possible that the heightened stress was affecting the spiritual energy component of his chakra? He heard of cases where mental strain caused chakra problems, but documented cases were driven by long-term psychological or physical torture. Maybe the drums of war at their doorstep impacted him more than he realized. Not only was another war coming, but Naruto was a prime target. If he had any chance of protecting Naruto, he needed to seriously level up his abilities, especially if Uchiha Madara was involved. Then there was the truth about Itachi. After Itachi killed his entire clan, Kakashi felt like he failed in passing on the will of fire to his junior in Anbu. He recalled the first time he heard about the massacre. At the time he couldn't believe Itachi would commit such atrocities against his own family. He had always felt a kinship with the younger Uchiha and was devastated that the shinobi he trusted went down such a dark path. The truth gave him some closure in that regard, yet opened old wounds about the darker side of how Konoha is governed. He understood that this was why Sasuke chose revenge once more and could relate to a degree. After his father's suicide, Kakashi also saw Konoha in a different light. His father was a legendary hero who protected the leaf and dedicated his whole life to the village. One mistake and he was ostracized to the point of choosing to take his own life. He was beyond angry in the first years following his father's death, but Konoha was his home and he wanted to protect the village, which meant the world to his father, and with time, Kakashi himself. He wondered how far Sasuke would go down the Avenger path and if he could truly be redeemed. The train of his thoughts did nothing to alleviate his pounding headache. With a groan, Kakashi moved to sit up, massaging his temples with a grimace. Taking in deep breaths, he waited for the ebb in his head to slowly subside before Kakashi finally took stock of his surroundings. He expected to find the same lodgings he, Naruto and Tenzo were resting at, but found himself in an unknown location that was somehow familiar. With that observation, his instincts immediately kicked in and he pushed the covers to the side and jumped out of the bed to get in a defensive position, or rather, he tried. As he moved to get out of the bed, his legs didn't reach the floor as expected and it knocked him off balance, causing him to tumble. With his honed reflexes, he quickly stuck his hands onto the floor, pushing himself into a makeshift handstand before jumping forwards and righting himself before he could land face first on the floor. The landing was shaky, but he still managed to stand upright, yet the tumbling movements brought upon another wave of sickness that made him sway on his feet. That is when he noticed that his legs were shorter, far shorter. In response, Kakashi put his hands into the known seals to dispel any genjutsu. However, his shout of Kai did nothing and Kakashi's dread grew. His chakra still felt weird, but he knew that he performed the release properly, albeit not as efficiently as he usually does. He opened his left eye to aid in the situation, but the familiar field of vision that Obito's Sharingan displayed did not appear. Kakashi tried to dispel a genjutsu again, this time channeling even more chakra and concentrating more on maintaining proper chakra control, but was disappointed once more with the lack of change. He cursed for not noticing that an enemy caught him in a genjutsu, and his concern for Naruto and Tenzo spiked. If the genjutsu was strong enough to nullify the Sharingan, it had to be another Sharingan user who had caught him, so he concluded that Madara had come back sooner than expected. That begged the question of why Madara hadn't simply eliminated him, or why Tenzo and Naruto hadn't dispelled the genjutsu yet. Highly confused, Kakashi began observing his surroundings, trying to get more hints. If he was indeed caught in a genjutsu, there was nothing for it except to hope that his teammates dispel it. He spread out his chakra, feeling the area around him, and could sense the chakra of what would be regular citizens and shinobi milling around. Observing his surroundings, he found them quite familiar, as if plucked from old memories. The bed was situated under the window, adorned with a blue kunai-patterned comforter. To the left of his bed, his desk was overlooking another window, where scrolls and paper were strewn all over the surface in a messy bundle. A bookcase was standing next to it, filled with books and numerous scrolls, some he collected while on missions outside of Konoha, while others he had inherited from his father. To the right of the bed, a closet and some shelves that stored a few more books. In front of the bed, two doors were closed, one that led to a small kitchen while another to a small bathroom. The quaint corner apartment was just as he recalled. In fact, he could smell his own scent all over the room. This level of scent is not possible from a one-night stay, rather, a degree indicating that Kakashi spent an ordinary amount of time here. Olfactory genjutsu were rare, and the level of detail that went into this genjutsu had to have a purpose beyond delaying him from a fight. Why would Madara place him in a genjutsu that dropped him into his childhood home, reverting him into a child and taking the time to add his scent and foreign chakra signals outside? As time passed by with him simply standing in the middle of the room with no changes, a genjutsu was becoming less and less likely. If he got trapped mid-fight that was still ongoing, his teammates would have cancelled it by now. If his teammates lost, then Madara would have moved forward by either killing him or whatever other purpose he could have in mind. Concluding that he was most likely in no immediate danger but has found himself in another set of bizarre events, Kakashi turned his thoughts to the mystery at hand. Kakashi sat back down on the floor, taking on a meditative position. This time, he studied the flow of his chakra, reading the various energy levels for clues. He focused on the feel of his spiritual energy, and it was clearing, overpowering his physical side. Comparing it to the natural feel of his chakra though, it felt normal, familiar, comfortable. Shifting his focus to his physical energy, the energy swirling inside him felt weaker than usual. Was there a jutsu that could reverse aging? That would explain his small stature and why his physical energy suddenly plummeted, driving his chakra system out of whack. Yet if that were the case, why would he be in his old bedroom? Was it possible that it wasn't his adult body turned to that of a child, rather, his soul sent back in time? The second he thought of that possibility he dismissed it. There is no such thing as going back in time. At that point, Kakashi decided to summon Pakun as an experiment to simply gain more data. Biting his thumb and running through the familiar hand seals, Kakashi called his most faithful companion. Yet, Kakashi only managed to create a cloud of smoke and growled in frustration. This time he consciously mixed his energies as opposed to weaving through the signs as if it was second nature to him, and Kakashi attempted the summoning jutsu once more. In a puff of smoke, Pakun appeared before him much to his relief. Before Kakashi could get a word in, Pakun addressed him. So, it's not just us, Pakun said evenly taking in Kakashi's form, his bored tone not able to fully mask the concern the pug was feeling. Did all of you get smaller? Kakashi asked for clarification. Yes, Pakun sighed. And this isn't a genjutsu, Kakashi mused out loud. No, Pakun confirmed and started sniffing around. It's your scent all right. What's happening? No idea. Kakashi could feel his headache increasing again. With a sigh he closed his eyes, dipping his head upwards and pinching the top of his nose in annoyance. I'd say we've gone back in time, but that's ridiculous. Is that the best you could come up with? Pakun was unamused. Any better ideas? Kakashi asked rhetorically before plopping down on the bed, his legs dangling in the air as they were too short to reach the floor. You're the genius, not me, Pakun shrugged before jumping on the bed next to Kakashi. You spoke for 4 months, Kakashi reminded him with a small fond smile. Pakun's only response was a small snort of amusement before they sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. If it really were true, what would that mean? Was this a second chance? Did he even want one? Were his students dead? Would they be born again, and if so, would they ever be the same people he grew to love? He was hit with a flood of emotions from melancholy and loss to a glimmer of hope to anxiousness all at once. If he had truly time traveled, was there a way to go back? Even if there was a way back home, should he take it? This could be an opportunity for him to give his students a happier childhood. Even if their bond would never be the same, didn't he owe them that much? They were the most precious people in his life now. His entire life he had sacrificed so much for the village and the future children of Konoha, couldn't he do the same for his students? With that train of thought he felt a stab of annoyance. After so many years in darkness, he had finally become happy. Didn't he deserve that happiness? Why him? Couldn't anyone else have been thrown into this mess? Be saddled with this responsibility? A restless energy overcame him, and he stood up abruptly only to find Pakun giving him looks of concern. Before we get ahead of ourselves, we need to get more evidence, Kakashi mumbled. Let's go for a walk and try to detect if there is anything out of the ordinary. If we don't find any other explanation, then although it's improbable, time travel will become the only likely conclusion. Then we can worry about what comes next. Sounds like a plan, Pakun replied faithfully and Kakashi nodded gratefully. Kakashi then walked over to the wooden closet and picked out the familiar blue baggy pants and navy t-shirt with white stripes on the side. Throwing them on quickly, he decided to forego the arm guards and made for the desk. Leaning slightly more on one leg, briefly noting that uncomfortable feeling of walking around heads shorter, Kakashi grabbed the calendar and marked the year as 3 years before the Kyuubi attack. I seem to be 11 years old, Kakashi informed Pakun. So, you've been in Team Minato for 2 years, are Obito and Rinchunin still? It's July, so yes, if I recall they would have just been promoted 2 months ago, Kakashi replied as he placed the calendar back, meaning we're getting training missions to get ready to be sent to the front lines soon. I should become a Jonin in around a year. If this is all true, that would give me a little bit less than 1 year to change Obito's fate. Kakashi grabbed a stack of papers and started riffling through them for more clues. These are my notes for Chidori, so the timeline measures up with the date. I seem to have just started coming up with the jutsu. Some of these notes are hilariously wrong though. I'd laugh if the situation wasn't so aggravating. In what way? Pakun was curious. The technical details are right, but the way Mini-Me was trying to piece them together to create a stable form of chakra is off. The elemental manipulation is on point, but Mini-Me is still using the logic of the base chakra form of the Rasengan instead of the proper shape manipulation. He wants to adjust the shape but is still leaning towards forms that favor explosive damage like the Rasengan despite envisioning the cutting effects of Chidori. Lightning is more suitable for precise attacks, thus favors a different form, Kakashi elaborated before going through more stacks of paper. Maybe Mini-U is still trying to add nature manipulation to the Rasengan, Pakun suggested, but Kakashi shook his head. I never tried to do that theoretically, only tried that hands-on and failed. In hindsight, that was a stupid move, Kakashi added. Nothing else here is very interesting. Studying some basic seals, the theory behind the water formation wall, no mission report, which means we're in a training period. I'm probably missing a meet-up with my team if anything. Regardless, the accuracy of having these notes means we're definitely not in a genjutsu. I can't imagine the amount of planning it would take to create such a scenario. I'd say it's the Mangekyo Sharingan, but Madara's is a space-time jut. Kakashi suddenly felt dread as the pieces came together. Pakun, if we really did time travel, then the only explanation is that it's a jutsu of Madara's. If that's the case, then he probably time traveled too. Maybe I traveled too by mistake. Maybe it's because Obito's Mangekyo is also a space-time jutsu. Maybe other people time traveled. There are too many possible scenarios, but imagine how easier it would be for Madara to move along his plans if he has foreknowledge. Come on, we need to see if anyone else could be a time traveler, and we can't do that here. With that, Kakashi and Pakun made their way outside, Kakashi quickly locking the door and activating the seals, filing away the need to upgrade them down the line if he was in the past. Walking around Konoha, Kakashi first peered at the Hokage mountain to only find 3 Hokage looking down at the village. As he started making his way towards the Hokage administration building with Pakun trotting by his side, he kept an ear out on the conversations around him, hoping to pick up some clues. While he had moved apartments down the line, he had walked this path so many times that he easily followed the proper route without much focus. There weren't many conversations around him as he meandered through the familiar side streets, making his way towards the main market area in the village. However, as stalls and shops started lining up along the side of the road, the conversations picked up. Don't worry, I'm sure Ukai-kun will make it back safely. They're 52 and I won't go down, take it, or leave it. These medicinal herbs are getting scarce with the war. I hope our ninja can secure more soon, but until they do, I can't give you a lower price. Aren't you worried about sending your kids to the academy during these times? Yuki keeps asking me to join, but I can't bring myself to sign him up with a war happening. I already need more kunai. With so many missions, I feel like I'm restocking my weapons every other week. Have you talked to Saryu-san recently? She is still mourning, and I can't get her to leave the house. Have you had better luck? It's been a while since we were in the village at the same time. Do you want to grab some? Oi, look, it's the Hitaki brat. Still can't believe they made him into a ninja. He slowed down as he heard his name coming in a conversation between 2 men a few meters away, and then pretended to be interested in the books a nearby stall was displaying, hoping to catch useful tidbits. He was far away enough that they wouldn't suspect him of listening in on their conversation, but with his advanced sense of hearing, it was easy to hear everything they were saying. I heard he really helped out on a mission with Idaki with his lightning-style jutsu by negating the opponent's techniques to provide him an opening. He is a genius after all. I know he's a genius, but Sakuma was also legendary, and look at the mess he created. It's not his skill I'm worried about, it's whether he can be trusted. Besides what he is doing with Idaki on a mission, isn't the brat under Minato-san's wing now? Well, his teammates are still fresh ninja, so they can't keep him on D-rank missions. The kid has been a chunin for years. Good. At least he's out there risking his life. That's the least the brat could do. Maybe he'll die and we'll be rid of him. He's just a kid, Kanzaki. Besides, the more ninja we have fighting the better. Takun started growling and Kakashi uttered his name slowly but with urgency. He couldn't risk bringing attention to himself and the villagers. Opinions of him were the least of his concerns now. Pretending he finished browsing the collection, he placed one of the books back on the display and started walking once more. When the men saw him approach, they changed the subject to other topics. That said, the information about Idaki-san was useful. He recalled that mission for transporting supplies to one of the front lines and being ambushed by Iwa ninja. If his memory serves him correctly, this is the time when forces on both sides started to dwindle, so more enemies were making it past the front lines and deeper into enemy territory. As such, many skirmishes would break out closer to the villages and genin were no longer being sent out on many missions, rather focused on supporting the village until they were better prepared. As he made his way towards the Hokage building, most of the conversations were mundane. From the small snippets he heard so far, there appeared to be no changes to the timeline as he remembered it. One conversation on the other side of the road, however, made him stand at attention once more, this time opting to stand at the side of the road pretending to observe those coming and going. You wouldn't believe what I heard from Yoku-chan. Fugaku-sama took the Uchiha heir with him to the battlefield. What would happen if Iwa ninja managed to kill him? That would have been a disaster. Can you imagine the moral boost the Iwa scum would have? I think it was just too risky, a woman bemoaned. Fugaku-sama only took him to a battlefield after the fighting was done. The man who appeared to be her husband shrugged as he balanced bags of vegetables. I think it's a good idea to inspire the kid to train hard. The Uchiha are some of our strongest ninjas, and while I don't like most of them since they think they're better than everyone, you can't deny their strength. But he's too young, and what if there were reinforcements? The woman wasn't convinced as selected carrots and placed them in a bag, before handing them to her husband and ripping out another plastic bag placed around by the vegetable stand. The legendary Sanin became genin at 6 years old and look at how strong they are now. The man reminded her with less than a patient tone. Even the Hitaki brat became a genin at 5 and is active in the field. Look at Uchiha Shisui, he's already making waves. It may not be completely safe, but exposing geniuses to the realities of the ninja world early has helped shape them into strong weapons. Don't spew nonsense about them being kids, or ninja. At that statement, Kakashi felt his temper rise but didn't outwardly show any reaction other than shifting his legs to place more weight on his right one and stuffing his hands deeper in his pockets. I wasn't going to. The woman seemed to be getting annoyed at her husband. I may only be a chunin, but even I know that a ninja village's strength is linked to how many geniuses it breeds. I'm with you. I just think the heir is still far too young to protect himself for a few seconds if anything went wrong. What is he, 5? He's 4, the man shrugged. He also had a bunch of Uchiha with him, he was fine. Kakashi had heard enough and jumped to the roofs. Takun, who was picking up on his summoner's mood, expected the move and was quick to join him. He didn't expect Kakashi to stumble and overshoot his boost. You okay? Takun asked with concern, struggling with a bit of chakra imbalance. Anyway, it's interesting what a few years can do to change your perspective on things. Kakashi sighed as he moved to jump to the next roof, this time accounting for his chakra issues as Takun followed. I forgot how harsh people's opinions were during times of war. Well, not forgot per se, but I didn't really focus much on what was happening around me, just on becoming stronger and stronger. This was just background noise. What really triggered you though? Takun questioned, filing the chakra imbalance for a later conversation. You didn't care when those men spoke about you worse than these two did. Was it Itachi? With that line of questioning, Kakashi stopped at the next roof and turned to Takun, the pain in his eyes clear to the loyal pug. He was a kid, Pakun. He was only 13, I can't imagine what he had to endure. It also explains why he didn't do anything that day in Konoha when he came with Kisame. I always wondered why he chose torture despite having such a window to simply kill me, Asuma and Kurenai. He did stab you for 3 days straight, Pakun noted, I wouldn't call that nothing. Itachi was never the type to torture his victims, always going for the swift death. Kakashi shook his head, I was so blind. Ironically, Kakashi thought about his phrase of looking underneath the underneath. In hindsight, the signs were there, and he missed them. If anything, that was probably why Itachi was brutal. It pushed Kakashi to believe that the comrade he once knew no longer existed, instead of really considering the implications. He truly had failed in so many ways. His heart heavier, Kakashi continued onwards until he made it to the Hokage building. I can take it from here, Pakun, Kakashi announced, not wanting Pakun to attract attention as others would wonder why a summon was there. I'll wait for a summon soon. Pakun understood, whatever this ends up being, you're not alone. Before Kakashi could return the gesture with gratitude, Pakun disappeared in a puff of smoke. Kakashi smiled regardless, promising himself to treat the pug to some steak sometime soon. The more the day went on, the more time travel was a possibility. It also made sense that Pakun and the pack time traveled alongside him as summoning was a space-time jutsu binding the summoner and the creatures of the bond. As he walked inside, he sat in one of the benches alongside ninja waiting to meet with the third to receive their missions or give a debrief about a completed one. If anyone had time traveled, there is a good chance they would come here and demand to speak to the Hokage. Nobody paid him any heed, assuming he was there for ninja affairs. His thoughts continued to plague him as he observed the ninja coming and going, but it was becoming harder to concentrate as his mind kept drifting back to Itachi and Naruto. Unfortunately, after around 2 hours when the office started winding down, he concluded that even if there were other time travelers, they weren't coming forward. Furthermore, there were no ninja who seemed to be acting differently or simply observing as he was. With that, he walked back outside and noted that dusk was starting to rise in Konoha. The nausea was starting to return as his spiritual energy built up once more over the last 3 hours. Not wanting to catch unwanted attention by dispelling his chakra sporadically in one of the busiest areas of Konoha, Kakashi started to make his way back home on foot. His progress was slow as the dizziness refused to subside, but the very idea of jumping on the roofs made his world turn. Luckily, nobody paid him any heed as usual, and he made it back to his apartment complex unhindered. By the time he had made it home, night had fallen on Konoha, and Kakashi was shaking slightly from the exertion, sweat falling down his face and his breathing shallow. With his head to the ground, Kakashi grabbed the staircase railing to support his ascent to his apartment on the upper floors. As he slowly made his way up, he started to lightly expel some energy as he wasn't sure he would make it upstairs if he waited any longer. Finally, Kakashi muttered when he saw the familiar door. He quickly opened the door, fumbling a bit at the lock. He walked inside, closed the door behind him and then collapsed on the floor, leaning his head back on the doorframe. He spread out his left leg outwards and lifted his right leg as he began to expel spiritual energy more readily. As his chakra system stabilized once more, he could feel the dizziness abate. This is going to be a problem. He was so consumed by the process that he didn't sense the presence of someone at his window till they called out his name. Kakashi. What's the matter? Kakashi lifted his head and found his sensei crouched at the window, a flood of emotions washing over him as he took in the face of his very well and alive sensei. His sensei, who left the world too soon and was unable to meet his bright sun beyond a few minutes in the Kyuubi's seal. His fate was too cruel. In fact, his sensei of 21 years was now a good decade younger than Kakashi himself. That brought forth a protective instinct in Kakashi, as opposed to the usual sense of tranquility. It was now his job to protect his young sensei, not the other way around. While he gathered his thoughts, Minato had already opened the window by the desk and made his way inside, kneeling in front of Kakashi who was still sprawled out by the door. Kakashi, what are you feeling? A sense of alarm in Minato's voice as Kakashi failed to reply and only stared at him. Nausea, Kakashi answered to reassure his sensei. Years in Anbu enabling him to mask his emotions quickly, but it subsided. I'm fine. He saw Minato place one hand on Kakashi's forehead and frowned. There's no fever. Any idea what brought this on? Kakashi batted his sensei's hand away. It's probably just something I ate, he offered as an excuse. I thought a bit of fresh air would help, but that was clearly a mistake. Minato gave a small noise of acknowledgement before he extended a hand. Can you stand? Without replying, Kakashi took the offered hand and allowed his sensei to help him get back on his feet, his stomach choosing to growl at that moment. Kakashi had been so wrapped up in the events of the day that he had forgotten to eat anything. Minato picked up on it and raised an eyebrow at the younger ninja. Have you eaten? I was feeling too nauseous. Kakashi shook his head slightly and was secretly glad he used food poisoning as an excuse. It conveniently fit. Come on, Minato led Kakashi to the kitchen. I'll make you some soup. Part of Kakashi wanted to tell the man to leave as his head was still swimming, but he also wanted to simply enjoy his sensei's company again, something he never thought he'd be able to. Where do you keep the pots, and well, everything? Minato had never been in Kakashi's kitchen before. I got it. Kakashi shook his head fondly and began navigating around the kitchen. He first started with exploring the ingredients in his apartment, not sure what he had in stock and what he could cook. While his student was busy setting things up, Minato took the moment to examine the neat kitchen and noted multiple cookbooks balanced at the side of a counter. Curious, Minato walked over and browsed the titles ranging from simple dishes to specialized ones for certain cuisines. You enjoy cooking? He couldn't help but ask, surprise lacing his voice. It started off as a necessity after father died, Kakashi answered his sensei, his face inside the fridge as he explored the items inside, decided to make some vegetable soup, and started taking out the necessary ingredients. A ninja must also make sure to eat a healthy, balanced diet. That said, I did find myself enjoying it and like to try out new recipes when I have some time. Minato was surprised at the mention of Tsukumo but decided not to dig deep on the sensitive topic and instead replied, I've never seen you bring anything to training other than simple bento boxes, as he watched Kakashi move back and forth from the fridge to the counter, placing radishes, carrots, green onions, mushrooms, tofu, satoimo and burdock root on the countertop. Can't have something heavy whilst training, Kakashi shrugged. I usually cook meals for breakfast and dinner only. Anyway, do you like Kenshinjiru soup? Any ingredients I should avoid? Do what you will. Minato smiled as his student began preparing the ingredients and washing the vegetables. How can I help? Can you tear the tofu into smaller pieces while I prepare the vegetables? Kakashi asked as he started drying off the vegetables with a kitchen cloth. Minato obliged and couldn't help but note the surrealism of the moment. When Kakashi didn't show up for training, he was highly concerned as he knew it would take something serious for his strict student not to join them. He even debated canceling training then and there, or at least sending a shadow clone, but refrained from being a mother hen as Kushina often accused him of. Regardless, he wasn't surprised to find Kakashi feeling unwell, but would never have thought he would end up cooking by his student's side. His student, who was currently midway through chopping green onions with speedy efficiency. The fact that Kakashi was apparently an experienced cook was a surprise and he didn't expect the young ninja to hone any techniques that weren't directly correlated with ninja skills. Minato watched his student take the bowl of tofu he prepared with a quick thanks and make his way to place them with the rest of the ingredients in the pot on the stove and stir them. After the liquid started to bubble, Kakashi turned down the heat to simmer and turned the knob for the timer. Should take 10 minutes or so, he announced. I just need to skim off the foam from the surface every now and then. Would you like some water while we wait? You're quite the host, Minato nodded. Kakashi gave him an unamused roll of the eyes as he went to fetch some cups, causing Minato to chuckle fondly. He grabbed one of the chairs at the table and turned it around, sitting down and leaning forward on the top rail of the chair. So, what did I miss? Kakashi asked as he handed his sensei a cup before downing his own glass and moving to refill it. Since you weren't there, we worked on Obito and Rin's sneaking abilities. You're already ahead in that regard, so you didn't miss anything, Minato informed him, taking another sip of the water. Kakashi jumped to sit on the countertop, checking on the soup as he replied, how'd they do? Minato raised an eyebrow at the line of questioning. Since when did Kakashi care about Obito and Rin's training? Out loud he said, Rin is displaying advanced Chunin-level skills, she really improved in masking her chakra. Obito does well at the start but is struggling with suppressing his chakra for long periods of time. Rin always had good chakra control, even at the academy, Kakashi noted, not surprised with the information. He saw that foam was starting to form and grabbed the ladle before starting to scoop some of it out and stirring the contents a bit. Becoming a medical ninja at her age is a testament to that, Minato added his 2 cents, recalling how she already knew basic medical jutsu when she first joined his team. With those skills and her dream to save as many of her fellow ninja as possible, Minato arranged for her to take medical lessons at the hospital 2 to 3 times a week early in the team's formation. He was very proud to see her flourish under the tutelage of the medical corps and always received stellar feedback from the hospital. With Obito's clumsiness, it's a good thing she is, Kakashi snorted, knowing he needed to jab at Obito otherwise his sensei would get suspicious. He couldn't change his personality overnight after all. Kakashi, Minato gave a light warning as he spun the now empty cup in his hand. Kakashi just shrugged and refrained from replying. With nothing more to say on that topic, a comfortable silence fell between the two as the smell of the vegetable broth created a homely atmosphere. The silence was only broken occasionally when Kakashi tended to the soup. Minato, unfortunately, wasn't the best of cooks. Sure, he could get by, but he only knew how to make some basic dishes. Luckily, Kushina was a wonderful cook and readily prepared meals for him. She would also occasionally come by their training grounds to feed his students. Growing up as an orphan, Kushina always longed to have home cooking, and thus, strived to learn cooking from an early age. As her skills grew, feeding those she loved was something that brought her immense joy. It appeared that his student was more similar to the love of his life than he thought. Kakashi, on the other hand, watched his sensei fondly from the corner of his eye. He nearly snorted in amusement when his sensei got a slightly sappy look in his eyes, clearly thinking about Kushina. His sensei was always head over heels for the redhead and it was easy to read the look of love now adorning his sensei's face. He wondered if his sensei was always easy to read and he simply didn't make the effort in the past, or if it was just his years of experience. It's ready, Kakashi announced after a few minutes as the timer rang, jumping down from the counter, turning off the stove and starting to pour some soup into the bowls. You can stop thinking about Kushina-san now, he couldn't help but add. He was rewarded with a splutter of indignation. I wasn't, his sensei lied as he stood up to line the chair back properly before sitting down again. Kakashi placed a bowl of soup in front of his sensei before raising both his eyebrows and titling his head slightly in an unspoken gesture of disbelief. Thanks for the food, his sensei avoided the topic and moved to grab the spoon. Kakashi obliged him and let the matter go. He sat down on the table in front of his sensei and took down his mask to join his sensei in eating, not seeing the point since his sensei already saw his face numerous times by that point. This is delicious, Minato exclaimed, his eyes shining with joy. Although it was clear Kakashi knew his way around the kitchen, he still didn't expect the rich flavors that exploded in his mouth. He had vegetable soup many times, but this was on par with restaurant quality. Then again, he shouldn't have been astonished. His student was a genius and surely any skill he decided to pick up would be developed with care. It pairs well with sake. Kakashi nodded, a joy bubbling in his chest at the pleased tone of his sensei. After everything the man had done for him, it was nice to repay him, even if it was with a small gesture of gratitude for cooking him a basic meal. Speaking from experience, Minato joked before taking another mouthful. Of course not, sensei, Kakashi replied, staying true to his younger persona. Even if I wasn't underage, it's one of the 3 prohibitions. That doesn't mean you can't drink at all when you're of age, Minato lectured, just make sure you have it under control. To prove his point, Minato unbuckled a latch and took out a storing scroll, bringing forth a small bottle of sake. Kakashi watched his sensei add a bit of sake to his soup and stir it. Should I be concerned you have sake readily available? He asked dryly. Don't be so melodramatic, Minato hummed with amusement. This is useful on missions for when you want to gather information. You'd be surprised how much more open people are over a bit of sake. Then he took another mouthful and sighed in content. You're right, that really hits the spot. Kakashi managed to control himself from teasing his sensei further on the matter so as not to come across as acting strangely. It was much more difficult than he thought. He got so used to trolling people and watching them fume never failed to bring him joy. It was no wonder Jiraiya enjoyed teasing him growing up. He could now appreciate the humor of his younger self's reactions. So how are you feeling? Minato asked once they had both finished their bowls. Better, but still a bit fatigued. Kakashi wanted to get out of training the next day to get his bearings and determine the best approach moving forward. Moreover, he knew he needed to see his teammates from afar before meeting them again on training day, lest he have a severe reaction. Not to mention he needed to sort out his chakra imbalance as well and get used to moving around in his smaller body. He didn't need to give Minato any more reason to be suspicious or observe him closely. Maybe you should go to the hospital and get checked out. Minato suggested before grabbing the plates and placing them in the sink, signaling Kakashi to remain seated when he moved to help. Kakashi typically trained till he dropped, so seeing him voluntarily admit to needing rest when he wasn't bleeding out or lying unconscious was out of character for the young ninja. Kakashi grimaced visibly at the mention of the hospital. No need for hospitals, it's just an upset stomach. One more day of rest and I should be back to normal. If I go to the hospital, they'll keep me under observation for days or some such nonsense. Right, I forgot about your fear of hospitals, Minato said as he started washing the dishes. I'm not afraid of hospitals, sensei. Kakashi frowned at the impression. It's just deathly boring there and the antiseptic smell can be nauseating with my advanced sense of smell. There are much better ways to spend time instead of lying down in a bed for days. Minato was hinting at Kakashi's desire to always leave the hospital as soon as possible, which was due to him wanting to train and not waste time resting. However, he didn't expect his sensei to assume that he was afraid of hospitals. After getting the Sharingan and spending many weeks in the hospital for chakra exhaustion, Kakashi tried to avoid the place as much as possible. If you say so, Minato didn't seem to be convinced as he placed the now clean dishes in the drying rack. Kakashi let it slide, not really wanting to get into that as it wasn't important in the grand scheme of things. I'll leave you to rest then. Minato walked over to Kakashi who was still seated at the table and ruffled his head. Kakashi ducked his head to the left to avoid the action, but Minato continued unfazed. Take tomorrow off and I'll see you the day after. If you need anything else, send one of your ninkin to find me. Will do, thanks. Kakashi nodded and followed his sensei to the door as he made his way out of the apartment. With that, he bid his sensei farewell before locking the door. Minato's arrival helped ease his concerns and distract him a bit, but Kakashi still felt drained from the events of the day. He went through his bedtime routine, wondering how he would quiet the thoughts in his head long enough to get some sleep. After changing into his nightwear, he walked into the bathroom and startled at his reflection. It would take some time getting used to seeing his younger face staring back at him. As he brushed his teeth, part of him selfishly hoped he would wake up tomorrow, everything would be back to normal, and he could chalk all of this up to a weirdly realistic dream. Conflictingly, he also wanted to stay in the past to spend more time with his sensei and old teammates. He gurgled some water to wash the toothpaste out of his mouth before waking back to his bed. The covers of his bed were still sprawled out in a messy heap, a sight Kakashi wasn't used to as he routinely made his bed each day. Nonetheless, tidying his bed was the least of his concerns today. With a sigh he lay down on the mattress and covered himself with the blanket, staring up at the ceiling. At first, he was considering the actions he needed to take the next day to get a plan started for changing the past, then he mulled over his memories to try and paint a picture of what to expect of his teammates, then he would jump back to the truth of the Uchiha Massacre before settling at the thought of his students no longer existing. Every time his mind wandered to his students, he immediately changed course, not wanting to process the implications of their somewhat death. As his thoughts shifted, so did he. It was around 2 more hours before sleep started to claim him. One good thing did come out of Minato's visit. While in the afternoon Kakashi did not want to sort through this mess, enjoying his sensei's company strengthened his resolve to create a better future for those he loved and to foil Madara's plans. He had always been the protector from the shadows. Maybe that was his fate. It was time to stop wallowing in self-pity and take up that role once more. With that promise, he finally fell into a deep slumber. Kakashi tapped the edge of a brush against his temple, letting out a small hum of consideration before bending down slightly and bringing his ink to paper and adding another line of text to one of the 8 scrolls laid out in front of him. The slight breeze slightly ruffled the tips of his hair as the sound of the village carried lightly inside, creating an ambience of white noise to fill the silence of his bedroom. Kakashi had already tidied up his younger self's notes into a neat pile and placed them in the lowest level of the bookshelf and took over the desk. It was already approaching afternoon, with most of Kakashi's morning being taken over by meditation to balance his chakra when he first woke up with the familiar nausea, followed by his morning routine and planning. While he still had doubts, spending time with Minato drove him to act and sort out his emotions on the go. He had to make sure his sensei's fate wouldn't end with the blonde being eternally sealed in the stomach of the Death Reaper. He knew he would have to study and explore more regarding space-time, but he couldn't just wing it while he explored the reasons behind his predicament. For all he knew, there was no way back. If his main theory stood, then Uchiha Madara was also in the past and he was not constricted in his movements as Kakashi would be as an 11-year-old chunin that's part of a team. He needed to move forward, and the first step was getting used to this new, or rather older, body. There were many actions he needed to take, so Kakashi decided to develop an action plan and sort out the priorities, hence the scrolls strewn over the desk. Kakashi jotted down more notes, pausing to grab the cup of orange juice he poured himself and taking a few sips. He figured he had 6 main focus areas, under which fell multiple tasks and subpoints. The first scroll listed his main objectives, the other scrolls were dedicated for each of the main objectives. Becoming comfortable with younger body. Navigating a personality shift. Researching key information areas. Changing events of the future in a plausible manner. Developing personal training plan. Developing my generation's skills. Miscellaneous. Knowing he didn't want to waste the entire day just planning, especially given that he had training with his team tomorrow, Kakashi finalized the list of urgent tasks for the day. He cast a minor wind jutsu that helped dry the ink quickly and then proceeded to summon Pakun. It wasn't a dream, was Pakun's greeting, clearly trying to mask his underlying distress. Kakashi could easily sense his companion's unease and kneeled in front of him, ruffling his head gently. Just one more thing we have to deal with, he said softly. Pakun simply gave an affirmative noise and changed the topic. What's with the multiple scrolls? Plan of action, Kakashi informed him, standing up to start rolling the scrolls. Can't have them in the apartment as the security seals are quite basic and I can't upgrade the seals to S-ranked ones overnight, given I was only up to C-ranked sealing at this age. Minato-sensei will definitely notice and ask questions I can't answer. I want you to give them to Bisuke for safekeeping until I can reasonably set up better seals. Kakashi decided Bisuke would be his best bet. While his top choice is Pakun, it was precisely that reason why he couldn't keep the scrolls with the pug. If he were in the middle of a mission and summoned anyone but Pakun, eyebrows would be raised. At the same time, he couldn't risk summoning Pakun outside of his apartment with those scrolls. Thus, Bisuke was the second Ninken he built a bond with and is his go-to when Pakun isn't available. Makes sense, Pakun shrugged. What's first on the agenda? I need to get used to this new body, Kakashi replied as he sealed the last scroll shut. I still had to expel spiritual energy in the morning and can already sense the buildup. Not to mention I must be able to do taijutsu with annoyingly short limbs. Kakashi grew into a lanky build and got used to having reasonable reach to deal damage with caution. He always fought right at the edge, just out of reach of his opponent to avoid damage but close enough to strike quickly at the first gap in defense. Now he had to fight at a closer range, not to mention stick to a more basic move pool around his team. With the scrolls secured, he got a small pouch and placed them inside. Pakun jumped onto the now empty desk. Kakashi held out the pouch and Pakun grabbed it with his teeth, giving a nod before disappearing in a puff of smoke. With that out of the way, it was finally time to get started on the day. While he told Pakun his first order of business was to get used to this body, he had another task that was more important. That was how he had found himself at Konoha's cemetery, making his way towards the familiar tombstone of his father. There were multiple families and ninjas paying their respects to fallen loved ones. Kakashi usually avoided the cemetery during the middle of the day, preferring to come at the less busy hours of dawn and dusk to avoid people glaring at him as he paid respect to the man they blamed for the war. However, the opinion of some of the villagers did not matter to him. Even after he gained the respect of the village for his service, he learned that respect was fickle and focused his energy on fighting for his precious comrades and for a better future. Luckily for Kakashi, those at the cemetery were too focused on their prayers and nobody paid the young ninja any mind. Hello, father, Kakashi greeted as he placed the chrysanthemums, which he purchased from a modest flower shop en route, in the small potholders on each side of the tombstone. I'm not sure if you remember our final farewell or if you're still tethered to this world, he spoke softly, grateful that nobody was visiting the graves around his father's so he can speak freely, but I wanted you to know that I forgive you, just in case. When you committed suicide it hurt me deeply, but I understand why you did it, Dad. Comrades are precious. He dipped the cloth in one of the buckets at the cemetery entrance and began cleaning the tombstone with water. I found great friends too. Do you remember Guy from the academy, the one who failed but trained hard? Well, he kept challenging me and we ended up becoming friends. He was the lone constant throughout my life. I owe him a great deal. Speaking of deals, I'm now dealing with a bizarre situation, but you don't need to worry, he hung the cloth from the bucket's handle. That's the one thing I'm good at, dealing with all the hardship that's been thrown my way over the years. It's like you taught me, we're ninjas, we endure. Anyway, I will protect those I love and help guide Konoha to a peaceful future, no matter what the rules say, Kakashi promised. I will protect them, like you did. Thank you for teaching me that. I'm proud of you, father, proud to call myself your son. I hope you can move on because I'll be more than fine. I hope you find peace. Kakashi moved to brush the top of the tombstone gently with his fingers. He stood in silent prayer for a few minutes, wondering how different things would be if he had traveled back in time to save his father. Kakashi took a deep breath, lifted his head up to the sky and watched the sunrays peeking out from behind the clouds. While he wanted nothing more than to simply stay with his father, he couldn't waste too much time as he had a mountain of tasks to get through today. He had to deal with time travel of all things after all. Fate loved to mess with him. He stepped out of the cemetery and made his way to the market. Eventually, he saw a splash of numerous green and red shops that marked the ninja gear shopping district and slipped into an alleyway. It was a shame Pain's attack had destroyed all these shops. Unlike other shopping districts in Konoha, this district retained the buildings from the founding of Konoha, whereby the shops and trades were passed down through the family. While the shops in other districts were more prone to renovating to create flashier displays as more civilians moved into the city and opened new stores, the shops in the Ninja Gear district maintained the original buildings. The belief was that the older the building looked, the better the perception of expertise that shop would have. His first order of business was to buy some sealing equipment. His younger self did not dabble much in sealing, and only had a few low-quality paper seals to practice on. To fix his chakra imbalance issue, Kakashi had a multi-layered plan. Yet until he could execute it, Kakashi had to guarantee that the imbalance wasn't noticed by his sensory-attuned sensei, thus needing to resort to the sealing arts. Kakashi typically purchased his seals from the same shop frequented by his sensei. He wanted to purchase a large amount of sealing equipment and knew he would stand out. Kakashi didn't want word to reach his teacher, therefore, he hid in the alleyway and transformed into a generic-looking ninja by mixing a few of the most typical Konoha features. He now had short light brown spiky hair, dark brown eyes and an average build. Satisfied with the look, Kakashi walked out into the district and made a beeline to his sensei's favorite shop. This wasn't the first time Kakashi had to deal with an imbalance, although it was at a smaller scale. Growing up, Kakashi had trained both energies as equally as possible to have a wider repertoire at his disposal. This allowed him to utilize jutsu across multiple ninja disciplines, not having to stick to certain techniques. It was not that ninja had equal energies, rather, it was that Kakashi had become accustomed to having nearly equal energy pools. In actuality, most ninja have a larger reserve of one type of energy. That's when chakra control comes into play, allowing ninja to mix these energies in the correct proportions to execute jutsu. The mixing ratio of spiritual and physical energy depended on the jutsu. For example, ninja who focus on genjutsu or medical techniques rely more on spiritual energy. If a ninja attuned to spiritual energy executed a genjutsu, they would need to pull less energy than a ninja with a smaller spiritual energy pool. The ninja that resorted to pulling a larger portion would not be able to consistently cast genjutsu as they'd run out of spiritual energy quickly. In Kakashi's case, developing nearly equal amounts of energies made it easier for him to control the mix as the pull from his pools was similar. After the death of all his loved ones, Kakashi could only describe his mental state as depressed beyond belief. His pool of spiritual energy, which is closely tied to a person's mental state, decreased. That said, his physical condition was still high, given that before the death of Obito he was obsessed with training. This led to an imbalance in his energy pools which Kakashi wasn't accustomed to. During that period, and thanks to his excellent chakra control, Kakashi was able to readjust the mix of energies with relative ease. As he devoted less time to training due to back-to-back Anbu missions, numerous injuries and increasing ennui, his body's physical condition mirrored that of his dampened spiritual energy. Eventually, this resulted in a balanced pool of energy once more. It was this balance that allowed him to copy ninjutsu mid-battle without having practiced before. Yet the decrease in his energy pools meant he tired out easily, especially when using the Sharingan. After fighting Zabuza and his face-off with Orochimaru after sealing Sasuke's cursed mark, Kakashi picked up his training, knowing he needed to improve should he desire to protect his students. The more time he spent with them, the more his mental state improved as well. The fading darkness and higher pace of training allowed him to enlarge his energy pools once more, and in fact, reach a level where he could use the Mangekyo Sharingan despite not being an Uchiha. Still, there were three key differences between the two situations. The main difference was that the first imbalance happened gradually, whereby Kakashi continuously made small adjustments and managed to maintain seamless chakra control. The second disparity was that in the first scenario he was still a child, and had relatively small pools of energy, compared to the spiritual energy of his 30-year-old self. Lastly, he did not have to deal with nausea. Kakashi was unaccustomed to having such a large discrepancy between the energy pools within his body that it resulted in bouts of dizziness. He knew that once he managed to bring up his physical energy, he would have access to a high Jonin-level chakra pool. Being a genius, it wasn't out of the realm of possibility for him to develop advanced chakra pools, even at this age. He did achieve the rank of Jonin before hitting his teenage years after all. Not for the first time since taking on Team 7, Kakashi cursed his inability to snap out of his depression and missed out on his true potential. As a child, Kakashi had larger than average chakra pools, being able to do Kage Bunshin and the chakra-consuming earth-style mud wave jutsu before even graduating from the academy. He vowed not to repeat that mistake. Regardless, no amount of genius could explain how his spiritual energy more than doubled overnight. Luckily for him, last night his sensei was focused on his illness and had arrived just as Kakashi had expelled his excess spiritual energy, so nothing seemed amiss. Yet without a seal to contain his spiritual energy, Minato would detect the odd imbalance as he was a top-tier sensory ninja. His plan consisted of old-fashioned intense physical training and constant meditation. That would take some time, and that's where sealing would come in handy. Kakashi needed to create the illusion of accelerated development by slowly decreasing the rate of the chakra absorption seals. Good afternoon, a man in his 50s greeted Kakashi as he walked in and received a quick greeting in return. Kakashi vaguely remembered the man's name as Takumi, the father of Kato who managed the shop in Kakashi's time. Takumi-san would sometimes come by the shop and work on seals behind the counter while Takumi tended to customers. He never had much conversation with the man beyond a nod of greeting if their eyes happened to meet. The store had two main sections, the larger being ready-developed seals for numerous purposes ranging from explosive tags to storing seals. The other was dedicated to sealing equipment for those who worked on developing their own seals. Given that Fuinjutsu was a rare art, the second section was much smaller, which made it easy for Kakashi to quickly find and pick up 90 chakra-holding sealing papers and 3 grade A quality sealing ink. That's a lot of sealing paper, Takumi observed with raised eyebrows when he eyed the transformed Kakashi walking to the counter, just as he had expected. Are you sure you know what you're doing? Takumi questioned as he started ringing out the order. If you're using this many seals, you're probably drawing the wrong formula. Kakashi had mentally debated the pros and cons of using body sealing versus paper sealing. While paper sealing was great for temporary sealing arts, body sealing was more apt for chakra suppression. The issue with body sealing arts was that regular application could have negative effects on his tenketsu, putting them under strain. There was a reason body seals hurt when applied. Therefore, body sealing served long-term applications, but a long-term seal was not a solution as it wouldn't allow Kakashi to develop his energy pools when not with his team or on a mission. Conversely, the problem with paper seals was that they typically didn't maintain a constant effect, as they were usually inactive when not in use. Yet they could still be applied for chakra control purposes. A good example would be the seal Jiraiya gave Kakashi to suppress the Kyuubi's chakra if Naruto lost control. In fact, that was his inspiration for the seal he had developed this morning. Unlike Jiraiya's seal, which focused on suppressing a large amount of chakra in one go, Kakashi needed to draw one that would constantly and subtly drain spiritual energy in small amounts to remain undetected. The low capacity meant that he wouldn't be able to reuse the same seal as it would fry after a limit, hence, the 3-month stock. I'm using them for training purposes. Kakashi lied easily. I recently got into the Fuinjutsu and am struggling with the amount of chakra to draw in the seals. My mentor advised drawing various seals with different chakra mixes to get a better handle on that before moving to the next stage. You're quite dedicated. Takumi bought the lie easily as he placed all the items in a bag. Most people would give up at this point. I hope you keep it and don't get discouraged. That'll be 7,250 ryo. I hope I pass this hurdle with this purchase though, Kakashi stated as he counted the money, creating an excuse to ward off suspicion once his fake persona doesn't come back. Sealing can be quite expensive. That's true, but it's very rewarding. Sealing is a delicate art, so your struggle is not uncommon. Takumi pitched in the hopes of securing a future customer. Some of the best ninja use sealing like the legendary Sannin and Konoha's Yellow Flash. It's what inspired me to start. Let's hope I have some talent in the art, Kakashi stated as he grabbed the bag of his sealing items. Thank you for your help. You're welcome, Takumi replied. I hope to see you again. Unlikely, but Kakashi kept the thought to himself and just nodded as we walked out. With that first purchase out of the way, Kakashi hid in the alley once more before canceling the transformation jutsu. He then created a shadow clone and handed the bag over to him. Get started on creating the seals, he ordered. His clone simply nodded and headed off to the apartment ahead of him. Developing Naruto's clone training method and seeing his students' constant use of clones had now made clone solutions top of mind. He then moved on to the next store that specialized in taijutsu-related gear, knowing they had high-quality training weights. He knew he couldn't use a transformation jutsu in this store as he needed to match the weights with his size, but any purchase Kakashi made here wouldn't cause any confusion, so he was in the clear. This store was more chaotic than the ceiling one, featuring rows and rows of various equipment. Moreover, the place was much busier, with numerous ninjas inspecting the goods across the shelves. Kakashi could even see a line forming at the purchase counter. With his intention of purchasing weights only, Kakashi hoped he could complete his purchase with quick efficiency. Unfortunately, life had other plans. Kakashi. A familiar voice called out enthusiastically from the nunchucks aisle he had just passed. How are you, my rival? Kakashi turned to face Maida Guy, who had run up to him by the time it had taken him to turn around. Nostalgia washed over Kakashi as he took in Guy's smaller stature, and dare he say, youthful features. He was tempted to raise his hand in a small wave with the familiar greeting of, yo, but managed to temper his instincts and simply nodded. By this age, Kakashi and Guy had formed a strong relationship, and Kakashi was grateful that he wouldn't have to build the relationship from scratch. Of course, the years they had lived through had strengthened their relationship, but Guy, like Naruto, formed strong bonds quickly. Kakashi knew that the young taijutsu user in front of him already valued Kakashi highly. Logically, he knew this, but he still felt a sense of loss knowing that his Guy no longer existed. It's been a while since our last challenge, Kid Guy exclaimed before Kakashi could get lost in his thoughts, his left hand still holding the nunchucks, his right clenching into a fist of passion. How about another test of our youth? I'm busy today, Kakashi declined rudely in line with his past self. What's with the nunchucks? He deflected the conversation before he got roped into a challenge. He knew Guy was skilled with nunchucks but never really bothered to wonder when Guy started training in them. The first time Kakashi saw Guy use them was during a challenge in their teen years. He didn't expect Guy to have started at a younger age. At the question, Guy's demeanor changed to a more solemn one that Kakashi didn't expect. Father died protecting us against the seven swordsmen. He did it using only taijutsu. But if he knew how to use weapons, then maybe. Here Guy hesitated before shaking his head to dispel his uncertainty. Maybe he could have defeated them without losing his life. I want to have something else to use if taijutsu is not enough. I can't believe I forgot that Guy is 1 year older than me and lost his dad at 12. You've thought this through. Nunchucks pair well with your taijutsu style, Kakashi said out loud, but inwardly felt like a terrible friend for not noticing this in the past. Kakashi was the one Guy confided in when he felt embarrassed by his father begging for forgiveness after screwing up on missions and being stuck as a genin. Naturally, he was also the one Guy turned to as he handled the grief after his father's death. Kakashi had always admired Maeda Dai. While his younger self valued ninja skills, even he couldn't help but find Maeda Dai's honesty and belief in himself refreshing, voicing as such to Guy. After the man's death, Guy felt guilty about how he doubted his father's way of the ninja. Kakashi quickly squashed those feelings and encouraged Guy to keep his father's memory alive by carrying on his teachings. After that, Guy bounced back quickly and Kakashi didn't think much of it. They do. Guy smiled from ear to ear and Kakashi nodded in affirmation, marveling at his friend's ability to shift emotional gears so easily. Hearing you say that gives me confidence, my rival. I will become a super strong nunchaku. Okay, Kakashi replied with a shrug, knowing that Guy did indeed become one of the strongest nunchucks he ever fought. Before Kakashi could dismiss Guy and get back to his shopping, Guy continued the conversation, curiosity tinging his voice. What are you doing here? I want to get training weights. Kakashi didn't see a need to lie. I will not fall behind, my rival. If Kakashi didn't know any better, he would say that Guy's pupils turned into small fires of excitement. Our taijutsu spars will be legendary. Kakashi was counting on the benefits of sparring with Guy more often to help grow his physical energy and was glad for the opening Guy had given him. We can also spar using weapons once you get a better handle on those nunchucks. I'm not an expert, but I know enough about them to help with any gaps, at least in the beginning. It was a bit out of character, but Guy was the only peer his age Kakashi had opened to in the past. If there was anyone Kakashi would warm up to first, Guy would be the least suspicious. You are too kind, my rival. Guy was ecstatic as he cried tears of joy. I will start training right now. Guy rushed to the counter to make his purchase before Kakashi could reply. Kakashi chuckled softly, finding comfort in the familiarity of his interaction with Guy in the face of these circumstances. For a few minutes, everything had felt normal. The rest of the afternoon passed by without any other unexpected run-ins. After purchasing the training weights, splurging on the weights layered with sealing jutsu that allowed him to adjust the settings as he improved his strength without having to constantly buy new ones, Kakashi grabbed a bento box from a nearby vendor and then headed off to train. The training ground he opted for wasn't large, consisting only of a circular patch of dirt with a few logs off to the side for taijutsu training, but it was obscured by multiple trees and was out of the way. It was usually utilized by the academy to ensure that students kept up with their katas during survival training drills. Survival training drills only happened on occasion, so the training grounds were free for most of the year. He expended the built-up spiritual energy and then spent the remainder of the afternoon going through taijutsu training, foregoing the weights for now to get used to his current speed for when he went out on missions. He started by running some katas to get a better feeling for his body. He started with slow katas, whereby his attention was on technique and not speed. As he ran through the choreographed set of forms, he slowly built up speed while maintaining his technique. After an hour of katas, he created a clone to spar against. He further had his clone change to different statues so Kakashi could learn to naturally adjust his techniques to various builds. He had his clone fight, namely at a similar stature to his old team to start with. The method was obviously not perfect, as his clone was also fighting with a handicap in the unfamiliar statures. Still, it was better than sticking to katas with no opponents to serve as a point of reference for dynamic situations. It was awkward at first, but as the evening rolled around, Kakashi got more comfortable. Fighting in this body still wasn't second nature by any means. He occasionally mistimed attacks and could still not fight at the top speed in this body. On a happy note, and as expected, his defense was in a much better state than offense, where reach played a lesser role. Therefore, he decided to end the training for the day by having his clone transform into his 30-year-old stature and attack him while he stuck to defense. This allowed his clone to be much more fluid in his attacks, resulting in a few bumps and bruises as his defenses were penetrated despite his clone holding back. Staring up at the sky and watching the sun start to set, Kakashi decided to stop for the day. He still had a long way to go and hoped that training tomorrow would be devoid of taijutsu. Given that he was supposedly recovering from an illness, Minato-sensei was probably going to avoid physical training. If he doesn't, then Kakashi would cite fatigue to get out of it. It may be out of character, but fighting in a clumsy manner would be a larger red flag, so he would take the less obvious of the two. There was one more red flag he needed to eliminate for tomorrow's team training, and he wasn't looking forward to this task at all. With a heavy heart, Kakashi left the training grounds. Eventually, he stopped at a roof that allowed him to hide between a cluster of water tanks but still had eyes on a familiar path from his childhood and waited. The more the minutes passed, the more Kakashi felt like bolting. He could feel his heart pounding, and he would take deep breaths to calm down, only for the pounding to resume after a while. He closed his eyes and concentrated on his breathing. Deep breath, 1, 2, 3, exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, exhale. I was awesome today. A voice cut through his meditation and Kakashi reluctantly opened his eyes. Minato-sensei kept finding me, but my time was getting so much better. I'm going to become a stealth master at this rate. Obito. Young and smiling widely. Not a care in the world. Kakashi's breath hitched, suppressing a sob. I thought you wanted to stand out. Rin laughed, and Kakashi didn't even know how it was possible, but hearing Rin was worse, much worse. He staggered back, retreating further between the water tanks. His breath came in quick short gasps as an immense wave of guilt washed over him. Their voices drifted farther and farther away, not because they were moving faster away, but because images filled his head. His hand stabbing Rin through the heart, her blood flowing freely. The smell of burnt skin as his Chidori burnt her body. Rin, calling out his name, louder and louder, angrier and angrier. Obito accuses Kakashi of failing to protect Rin. It was a recurring nightmare, but now it assaulted his reality. It was too much. I'm having a panic attack. Kakashi rested his back on one of the water coolers as he tried to control himself. Step 1. Find a comfortable position. His mind supplied him with the steps to manage a panic attack once he realized what was happening. He expected a reaction but not a full-blown panic attack. It was much harder than expected to see them. Step 2. Focus on your breathing. As he shifted his attention to his breathing, the images in his head abated, his brain now consumed with analyzing the pattern of his breathing. Don't think. Obito and Rin's voices started fading away as they walked further away. Step 3. Deep breaths for 4 seconds, hold for 2, exhale slowly. Now that he had gauged his breathing, Kakashi moved to controlling it. 4-2-4. 4-2-4. The familiar breathing pattern helps slow down his heart rate. 4-2-4. Obito and Rin turned the corner, their voices joining the cacophony of the hustle and bustle of Konoha's active evening streets. 4-2-4. Vendors were closing shops and comrades were meeting up to have meals at restaurants. others opting for quick drinks to toast a fallen comrade in the hopes of a coming victory. 4-2-4. After a few repetitions, Kakashi had finally regained control, grateful for having the foresight to pick a spot that hid him from view from all angles. How can I face them tomorrow? Part of him wanted to run away, but he immediately buried those feelings. Resolutely, he pulled himself back up and jumped through the roofs once more. He estimated that his panic attack was around 5 minutes. He had to catch up with his teammates again. He had to do this. He easily managed to sense their chakra and headed over. He was grateful when his eyes landed on them this time, but he didn't feel like the whole world was crashing all around him. His chest felt heavy, his breathing constricted, but he was in control this time. He followed them discreetly and listened to their inane chatter. Around the corner, up the hill, across from the fruit stands. Every time he felt it became too much, he would stop briefly, close his eyes, collect himself, and follow again. By the time Rin and Obito wished one another a good evening and went their separate ways, Kakashi was able to watch them without panicking and falling into despair. While by no means had he gotten over the guilt and immense sadness, he was certain he would be able to mask his emotions tomorrow without giving anything away. Emotionally exhausted, Kakashi made his way back to his apartment for some rest. His clone had already dismissed himself a while back after he had finished the seals and hid them in various books on Kakashi's shelves. Not in the mood to cook anything, Kakashi opted for a simple omelet and quickly brushed his teeth before collapsing on the bed. Kakashi enjoyed the cool morning air as he sat atop of a tree branch, book in hand, waiting for his team to arrive. July and August were the hottest months of the year in Konoha, so it was always a good idea to start training early before the afternoon rolled in. He had already tested the seal on a clone this morning and it worked as planned. Reassured, he had placed the seal on himself to help regulate his spiritual energy and made his way to the training ground. It was incredible how, despite all the years that had passed, he easily fell into the routine. He had modeled the schedule of Team 7 to that of his senseis, the only difference being he made his team wait instead of him waiting for Obito. Otherwise, the team met at 7 a.m. during the summer months and 9 a.m. during the winter time. Unlike his students, however, Kakashi didn't typically wait around or chat until Obito arrived. He, Rin, and Minato, all invested in various theoretical aspects of the ninja arts, would often become engrossed in their own research. Kakashi tended to focus on ninjutsu, Rin studied up on medical ninjutsu while Minato dabbled in fuinjutsu. It's a shame Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura didn't take as much initiative in their own training. Growing up in times of war, his generation were more prone to learning by themselves since the adults were too busy fighting a war. He couldn't fault his team though, he hadn't really pushed them to kick that habit, which should have been his job as sensei. He should have been more active in their training, teaching them more than formation tactics and foundational chakra control techniques. Sure, he taught Sasuke Chidori, but he was only driven to do so because Gaara was a threat, and he didn't want his student to die. He was still fighting his demons when he first took on Team 7. By the time he had begun to kick into gear again, the village was attacked and the third died. Then Itachi decided to pay a visit and unleashed Sasuke's demons and desire for attaining power at the fastest rate possible. Unfortunately, with the death of the third and Tsunade's appointment, he was tagged for numerous S-ranked missions to maintain the peace and ensure none of the other villages took advantage while things settled. In that time, he ran multiple reconnaissance missions and even captured a missing Konoha ninja who thought they could use the confusion to sneak back in and steal some artifacts or scrolls for quick money. While he tried to be there for his team and hoped to reach out to Sasuke in between missions before it was too late, he had indeed been too late. His talk with Sasuke didn't trigger the change he had hoped. When he heard the news of Sasuke's defection and found Naruto unconscious at the Valley of End, the clear shape of a Chidori in the chest of his jacket, Kakashi knew he had failed horribly. He couldn't fathom how his jutsu was once again used against a Jinchuriki teammate. It was at that point that Naruto set off with Jiraiya and Sakura found a mentor in Tsunade. With Sasuke being trained by Orochimaru, he decided to leave his students with stronger mentors. After training a teenage Naruto on nature manipulation to complete the Rasengan, Kakashi wondered how much stronger they would have been if he had been a more vigilant sensei. He wondered if Sasuke would have stayed. Kakashi shook his head to dispel these thoughts. This was not the time to wallow in self-pity. He had a plan to execute, and he vowed that if he got the chance to be their sensei again down the line, he would do it right this time. For now, he needed to focus on his current teammates and his own training as well. The first thing Kakashi wanted was to find a way to alter Chidori to bypass the tunnel vision problem now that he no longer had the Sharingan, and never will. Obito will not die this time, not on my watch. The Sharingan allowed him to utilize the jutsu without having to re-engineer it, but he knew with some brainstorming, his knowledge of ninjutsu and good old trial and error, he could find a solution. Chidori was a very versatile jutsu after all. According to the stories he heard of Sasuke, his student had created an extendable version. He himself had already created a version where he could link two Chidori and dissect enemies with the connected cable. He was certain he could create a usable version. His lightning cutter had become such an integral part of his fighting style and he wasn't going to abandon the jutsu just because he had lost the Sharingan. This was why Kakashi had grabbed a highly advanced book on nature and shape manipulation to read. He had already read it before, having inherited the book from his father, yet it was beyond his 11-year-old's knowledge. However, his younger self was close to reaching that level of knowledge and it was only after he was able to comprehend the principles in the book that he was able to create the Chidori. Therefore, reading this book would show his sensei his ninjutsu theoretical levels were higher than what he probably presumed, allowing him to present a variation of his famous jutsu without arousing suspicion. Revising these concepts could also breed ideas to fix the Chidori for Kakashi to try. It was a win-win. Kakashi's thoughts were interrupted as he sensed Rin's chakra entering the training ground. His breath hitched for a second, but he squashed down his guilt-ridden feelings, took a deep breath and raised his head from the book as his teammate walked towards him. You can do this. Good morning, Kakashi-kun, Rin greeted like usual as she walked up to the tree Kakashi had perched on. Kakashi didn't trust himself to speak just yet, but found amusement in the Sasuke-like grunt he used as a greeting. Minato-sensei said you were sick. Rin continued undeterred, used to Kakashi's lack of social skills. How are you feeling today? I'm fine, Kakashi shrugged, then retreated to the safety of his book, hoping Rin would leave him alone for now. While he wasn't devolving into panic attacks, it was taking all his self-control not to break down again. From his peripheral vision, he saw Rin move to say something before resisting with a frown on her face. The frown was quickly replaced with a soft smile as she dropped whatever she initially planned on saying. I'm glad that you're doing better, she settled on before taking a seat at the base of a tree and bringing out her own medical text to read. Kakashi was grateful for Rin's consideration. He really wasn't ready to have a conversation with her. She always had high emotional intelligence that he never fully appreciated when she was alive. While he would love to direct Rin's attention to other ninja arts to build up her fighting repertoire to have a better chance of avoiding being captured, it was still too soon. Rin was too focused on enhancing her medical skills that she forgot Tsunade's third rule of being a medical ninja: no medic ninja shall ever die until they are the last of their platoon. As their team grew stronger, the enemies they faced became more skilled and Rin had found it harder to keep up. Eventually, she started to become a liability in need of protection that would only jump in to heal them once the fighting was done. Although Rin was never a strong fighter, she wasn't weak either. A fighting style similar to Shizune's would suit her better than Tsunade's and Sakura's brand of brutal strength. He trained his eyes on the pages in front of him, rereading the same page for the fourth time. His thoughts were constantly distracting him. He had to find time to finish writing up some aspects of his plan. Once they were grounded in writing, they would no longer swim around in his head, and he could better focus. Good morning. His sensei chirped as he made his way to his students. Good morning, Minato-sensei. Rin smiled in return while Kakashi just nodded. 2 nights ago, he was stuck in the whirlwind of coming to terms with his predicament that he couldn't prepare to face his should-be-dead loved ones. When Minato popped in to check up on him, Kakashi was grateful for his years in Anbu that allowed him to put up an emotionless barrier to get through the interaction. Now that he wasn't in a hyper-paranoia mood, Kakashi felt a wave of immense sadness. Naruto had told him how he had met Minato in the seal, and Kakashi was grateful that Naruto could finally build a bond with the kind man. As he watched the man greet them jovially on a calm summer morning, knowing that he never had a chance to raise his son, Kakashi lamented over how unjust and unforgiving the ninja world could be. Minato as the 4th Hokage was his hope for a better future, and that hope was squashed swiftly, without mercy. If he managed to save Minato, how different would the world be? At that thought, his melancholy was punctured by small tendrils of hope. How are you feeling? Minato turned his head upwards to specifically address Kakashi, cutting his thoughts short. Fine, Kakashi replied from his perch, schooling his voice to hide his emotions. I'm still a bit concerned. I think it's best for you to avoid too much physical training today, to give your body some more time to recover, Minato stated, his voice a cross between concern and an order. It was clear that Minato expected pushback from Kakashi about taking it easy, and Kakashi, true to the script, didn't disappoint. I'm not just going to sit around while you 3 train. Kakashi finally brought the book down from his face and supplied the response his younger self would have had at such a remark, a hint of fake annoyance seeping into his voice. In truth, he hoped for this response from Minato as he still wasn't fully accustomed to this body, yet he knew if he simply agreed to rest his sensei would grow more concerned. He was glad that his sensei was predictable. You misunderstand me, Minato chuckled, also undeterred by Kakashi's brusque replies. Rin and Minato had clearly developed a tolerance for his personality by that point. It was only Obito that still got annoyed by Kakashi's harsh and curt comments. Kakashi, being too serious, was equally annoyed by Obito's lack of professionalism, leading to the constant fighting. I want each of you to focus on some solo training today, Minato elaborated. I'd like that, Rin replied, saving Kakashi from the need to carry the conversation further. I've been reading about this technique to separate liquids of different viscosity levels in the body. It could be very useful for transfusions and treating poisons. Actually, I already have a regimen in mind for you, Rin. While Kakashi should keep the physical training to a minimum today, this is a great opportunity for you to work on improving your stamina, Minato replied. Rin's face morphed into a grimace at the thought of the physical training. Wouldn't it be much more useful for me to learn a technique that could help you if you got poisoned in battle? Nice try, Rin, Minato laughed, immediately seeing through her attempt to avoid physical training. Physical exercises are so boring, she groused, but there was a levity in her voice, and she even gave her sensei a smile to catch on. Rin wasn't stupid. She knew it was important to improve her physical fitness, but her passion for medical ninjutsu eclipsed other aspects of the ninja arts. Rin retained the proper amount of finesse in weaponry and stamina as befitting a chunin, but only did the bare minimum and devoted the rest of her time to medical ninjutsu. It was something her sensei had learned about her early on, and she was used to him nudging her to keep up with her physical training. Alas, such is the cruelty of the ninja world, Minato declared dramatically, holding a hand to his heart in mock pain, and Rin rolled her eyes in response. While most ninjas saw Minato as a kind but serious figure, those closer to him were witness to his occasional goofy side. Minato and Rin's humorous banter was a true juxtaposition to their futures that Kakashi grimaced at the contrast. Kakashi had to remind himself that this Minato still hadn't lost his students and still didn't have the weight of the village on his shoulders. No ninja going through war didn't know loss, but Minato had so far been one of the lucky ones who didn't lose any of those closest to him yet. You know nothing of the true cruelties of the ninja world, sensei. Well, in that case, I better get back to reading since you won't let me work on this, Rin joked and emphasized the you, with a faux glare at the blonde. At least I can fully study the theoretical part now and start practicing later. I'll leave you to it then. Minato laughed and sat down next to Rin, and directly under Kakashi, before taking out a scroll and settling in to read himself. Curious, Kakashi peeked down to look and could make out the advanced Fuinjutsu information and red whirlpool at the blank space at the bottom, marking it as an Uzumaki scroll. Kakashi knew enough about Fuinjutsu to recognize that the information was regarding sealing large amounts of chakra. While it was not the Death Reaper seal, it appears that his sensei was studying means to seal tailed beasts at this time. It was definitely his love for Kushina driving him to research this topic. Knowing his sensei, he wanted to be at hand to help her if anything went wrong. Curious, Minato, who had sensed Kakashi's lingering gaze, asked with amusement. Just as Minato did, Kakashi often took a glance at what his sensei was reading. However, he only ever showed an active interest when his sensei was studying ninjutsu, never Fuinjutsu. I can't even make out half of that, Kakashi admitted, which was of course a lie. He was supposed to only know enough about sealing to qualify as B-rank knowledge. Even with that, he had never really discussed Fuinjutsu with his sensei till after Rin's death. Kakashi was curious about the seal placed on his teammate and wanted to know if there was a way to save Rin if she hadn't committed suicide. It was then that Minato started teaching Kakashi about Fuinjutsu, enough to make Kakashi understand that while there was a way to stabilize the seal, Rin's level of chakra was much too small to contain a tailed beast and she would have died in a few months regardless. It made Kakashi feel a bit less guilty, knowing Rin's fate was sealed the moment she became a Jinchuriki. I wouldn't expect you to, Minato laughed. Let me know when you want a change of pace from advanced ninjutsu, I can share some Fuinjutsu material with you. Judging by the book you're reading, you're way ahead in your ninjutsu studies. There was an excited glimmer in Minato's eye and Kakashi was surprised by the offer. Minato had never actively got into Fuinjutsu discussions with any of them. None of Minato's students had shown an active interest in sealing. Was the minuscule show of interest all it took for Minato to jump at the chance to discuss Fuinjutsu with his students? Maybe this was a chance to grow closer to his sensei. I'm stuck on how to add nature to the Rasengan, Kakashi stated instead. I tried to go by feeling but the Rasengan is the epitome of shape manipulation. I think a more academic approach will better allow me to move forward. Minato had taught Kakashi the Rasengan in the hopes that his student might help him complete the famed jutsu. Any theories? Minato asked curiously. Unfortunately, Kakashi had never brainstormed with his senses on possible approaches, choosing to do it all by himself. Chidori was born out of those efforts instead. Now that he knew how to bypass the difficulty of performing high-level shape and nature manipulation with clones, maybe he should give his sensei the same hint he unwillingly gave Naruto about looking two ways at the same time. Instead, Kakashi shook his head. Not yet. Thus, this book. He refrained for now, knowing he must create a better opening into the topic. I'll leave you to it then. Minato nodded with a bit of disappointment, and went back to his scroll. The three ninja enjoyed the companionable silence that was interrupted with the occasional flip of a page, the gentle rustling of leaves and the chirping of birds in the distance. Obito's tardiness was allowing him to slowly get comfortable with his teammates' presence. After around an hour had passed, Obito finally arrived. Running up to them, breathing somewhat heavily, but that didn't stop him from giving them a wide smile. Sorry I'm late, he shouted as he approached and waved a wand in the air. I had to help Miyu Obakin with her groceries. On the way I dropped her eggs, so I had to buy her a new batch. It was uncanny how much Obito reminded him of Naruto at that moment. It was interesting how two people who grew up without ever knowing the love of a parent could have such blinding smiles. Unlike Rin and Minato, sitting with his teammates for the last hour better prepared him for Obito's arrival. He was pleased to note that his emotions were easily kept in check and inwardly enjoyed the irony that Obito's tardiness benefited him for the first time. When Kakashi didn't acknowledge Obito being late, there was some confusion. Kakashi knew he should have berated his teammate to stay in character, yet he couldn't bring himself to yell at Obito when all he wanted to do was ask for forgiveness. That's fine, Obito, Minato filled the silence instead, but was also looking up at Kakashi in confusion. Kakashi refused to acknowledge any of them, face still in his book. What trick are you playing, Bakashi? Aren't you going to lecture me about the rules or something? Unlike Rin and Minato, Obito was not the type to let things slide and was uncomfortable with the lack of familiar banter. I'm trying to finish this chapter, Kakashi bit out with annoyance from his perch, not even bothering to spare his team a glance. I'm almost done. Could you be quiet for a moment and let me concentrate, or are you not capable of even that? His team seemed to relax at the familiar harsh rebuttal from the rule-abiding ninja. Even Obito's shoulders relaxed a fraction as he moved to reply when Minato spoke up, cutting the argument short. Let's leave Kakashi to his studies while I explain the training today, Minato intervened as Obito glared at Kakashi. I want to assign you some solo training. You each have some individual areas you need to improve on. Solo. Obito was obviously curious and decided to yell at Kakashi later, turning to give his sensei his full attention. Yes, Minato nodded. Since Kakashi is still recovering from his illness, I thought this would be a good opportunity to work on some individual skills. I already told Rin she'll be working on improving her stamina. You'll focus on some chakra control exercises in Kaka. I know my chakra just fine, Obito complained, interrupting Minato. I want to work on the Phoenix Sage Fire Jutsu if we're doing solo training. It's not up for debate, Minato sighed at the complaint. First Rin, now Obito. Why couldn't his students just trust his judgment? But I want to get the jutsu down. I'm so close, Obito wasn't deterred. To prove his point, Obito ran forward, going through the signs of the jutsu and released the fire technique. Although the expected outcome of the jutsu was to have bullets of fire shoot out in a barrage, Obito's technique released misshapen spheres of various sizes. Some were so big that they collided and formed larger bullets. The various sizes gave each bullet a different speed, so instead of having a barrage of bullets head towards an enemy, they were faced with random balls of fire passing by at random rates. You really have improved, Minato encouraged him when he saw Obito's face fall in despair. Last time I saw you use the technique, most of the spheres collided and the jutsu fizzled out without making much distance. There will be more time to perfect the jutsu, but for today it's best if you improve your chakra sense. But I just need a bit more time with it, Obito whined. I almost have it. Improving your chakra control is what you need to get the jutsu down, Minato lectured. Rin, why don't you get started on some katas to warm up while I take Obito through the chakra control exercises, then I'll join you. Sure thing, sensei. Rin smiled and moved to the left side of the training field while Obito and Minato took the right side. Kakashi, grateful for the reprieve, closed his eyes, laid his head at the tree bark, and took a deep breath. Interacting with his teammates was harder than just observing them from afar. He was close to letting his emotions out and needed a moment to capture his breath again. After calming down, Kakashi observed his team from afar to get more comfortable around them. Rin was going through some basic taijutsu kata, and while her moves lacked power, she moved with the grace of hours of practice. Obito, on the other hand, appeared to be struggling with the exercises their sensei had given him, if his frustrated pout was any indication. His sensei was as calm as ever, guiding him gently as Obito tried the exercises again. When the aching in his chest was replaced with boredom of watching low-level training exercises, Kakashi went back to his book, flipping back 2 chapters. With all the commotion, he hadn't really focused and was mindlessly going over the pages. I really need to get my act together and stop wasting time spiraling. Refocused, he found himself getting lost in the familiar advanced ninjutsu theories and concepts. At one point, he moved to the ground and unsealed a scroll and pencil, noting down ideas of how to alter his chidori and other jutsu as he went along. Concepts regarding shape translated into various possible lightning forms, concepts regarding size morphed into ideas for tiers of strength, while concepts of area effects transformed to ways he could manipulate the terrain to his advantage. It was funny, but investing time in ninjutsu theory reminded Kakashi of the time before his life turned into one tragedy after another. A period in his life when he would spend most of his free time consuming knowledge on all topics, mainly ninjutsu. However, the constant hits to his psyche dissolved his passion for anything beyond fighting to protect future generations. His reading material was replaced with Jiraiya's novels as an escape from reality. Some of the possibilities he was drawing out weren't the first time these jutsu had occurred to him, but after Obito's death he had tucked his notes away for a later date that never came to be. Guess it took the weight of Konoha on my shoulders to rekindle my passion for knowledge. That was how Minato found him, sitting under the tree scribbling into a scroll passionately. Minato smiled fondly at the look of absolute concentration on his student's face and decided to leave him be. Kakashi sensed him though, and looked up to his sensei after finalizing a note in the margins. Was going to ask you to spar a bit with Rin, Minato informed him. If you're too engrossed in your studies, don't worry about it. You do need to move a bit today though, so make sure you run through katas when you're done. That's fine. Kakashi shook his head, stretching his hands above his head and shifting his gaze to the sky, the position in the sun surprising the silver-haired ninja. Is it already around 2 p.m.? Ah, Minato nodded, you kinda got lost in your studies there. It's fascinating to read about the various options for building a jutsu based on the effects you were looking for. Kakashi shared his thoughts. It got me thinking, sensei, what are you planning for the addition of your nature to the Rasengan to actually do? He emphasized the end. You don't need to consider the result for jutsu that doesn't require hand seals to create them since they react in accordance with natural law. Naruto, for example, only added wind and the Rasengan adapted accordingly. Chidori, on the other hand, used seals. His original idea was flipping the script, focusing on nature manipulation, and then adding the shape. However, as his younger self worked on the jutsu, he got an idea for the effect he wanted and used seals to get the intended result. Mulling over these two different methods of jutsu creation was how Kakashi came up with the trick to adapting his chidori. Instead of an elemental jutsu, he was going to recreate it as pure nature manipulation and adjust with shape manipulation for various effects. It will be harder, much harder. He had to take his nature manipulation skills to the highest level, just as Minato did with the Rasengan. The fourth Raikage used a version of such manipulation with his lightning clock to give him his speed, but it had an effect on his entire body as opposed to a purely offensive jutsu. If Kakashi managed to take his nature manipulation ability to that level, it would allow him to flexibly wield Chidori and adjust its strength, range, effect and so much more. He would essentially be wielding lightning as an element, and not a series of individually executed jutsu. It made him curious about the thought process his sensei employed to create the epitome of shape manipulation. I never did tell you how I created the Rasengan, did I? Minato exclaimed with a smile, his joy infectious. Kakashi gave a soft smile that was thankfully covered by his mask as he shook his head in the negative. Minato sat in front of Kakashi eagerly. It's quite the tale. It was during the Second Shinobi World War. I was on a mission in the hidden village of Rain and my squad ended up fighting Roshi and Han from Iowa. Have you heard of them? Yes, I was Jinchuriki. You fought both at the same time. Kakashi replied with a question of his own. He knew of the Jinchuriki, of course. Unlike his students' generation, Jinchuriki were common knowledge as there was a flee on-site order for Jinchuriki during the war. With the Kyuubi attack, the academy removed the subject of Jinchuriki from the curriculum so young shinobi didn't ask too many questions and protected Naruto's identity from his generation. While the third Hokage meant well, Kakashi thought it was overkill given that it could have resulted in ninja being caught unawares. Regardless, the fact that Kushina was the host of the Kyuubi was a well-guarded secret. Kakashi only found out after he was tasked with guarding Kushina during her pregnancy. It was surprising that most Konoha ninja didn't realize that Konoha possessed the Kyuubi as other hidden villages had Jinchuriki and they played a large part in building their strength. Most villagers simply believed that their status as one of the main hidden villages came from being the first village to be founded along with the residents of some of the most prominent clans and bloodline limits. They assumed Konoha didn't need a Jinchuriki to maintain the status quo. Kakashi, being a genius, knew there was more to it. Since Madara used the Kyuubi in the fight against the first Hokage, his younger self believed that Konoha had the Kyuubi stored away but not in a host. He just never had a reason to voice this opinion out loud, and knew that if he was correct, such knowledge would be classified as sensitive information. Kakashi wasn't going to betray Konoha. He wondered if others had come to the same conclusion and chose to remain silent as well. The revelation of Kushina's Jinchuriki status came as quite the shock to him. Fight might be a stretch, Minato chuckled nervously. During the face-off, both transformed into their tailed beasts and attacked us with balls of condensed black and white chakra. The technique was so dense that the ground under them began to get flattened into the shape of a crater. They call it the tailed beast bomb. Knowing that's not a jutsu that can be blocked, I used the flying thunder god to teleport the entire team out of harm's way. Even after we teleported far away, we could see the destructive power the jutsu created. It was like nothing I've ever seen before. It was a close call. You had to flee? Kakashi asked incredulously. He was used to ninjas fleeing from his sensei, not the other way around. He vaguely cursed his younger self for not being interested beyond the jutsu. Yes, Minato nodded seriously. Jiraiya-sensei was with me and two other Jonin, but fighting against two Jinchuriki that had a solid relationship with their tailed beast would have definitely resulted in some casualties even if we did manage to win. Also, I was only 14. Sounds like the most sensible course of action. Kakashi placated him but internally snorted at the defensive tone his sensei took at the end. Who knew his sensei had some ego underneath all that kindness and down-to-earth personality? Anyway, that was the inspiration for the Rasengan. I wanted to create something that would counterattack the tailed beast bomb, Minato continued. That's a scary thought. Kakashi shuddered at the implication. While he never saw one personally, he heard the account of Jiraiya and later Tenzo. He could only imagine the level of destruction such a jutsu would do. Without a Jinchuriki in Konoha, if the Jinchuriki of our enemies joined the skirmishes more often, Konoha would be at a large disadvantage. Mentally he wondered how Kushina played a role in all of this but knew his sensei wouldn't bring her up. In fact, Kakashi noticed Minato tense lightly at the mention of a Konoha Jinchuriki. For less experienced ninja it would have gone unnoticed, but Kakashi was an experienced Jonin of Konoha. Exactly, Minato nodded and quickly shifted the topic away from Jinchuriki. I struggled with containing the chakra. The tailed beast bomb doesn't rotate, but Jiraiya-sensei gave me the hint that the easiest way to need chakra is by following the whorl on your head. I was desperate for anything at that point, but apparently I have two worlds, each in a different direction. I didn't think that was possible, Kakashi stated and nearly laughed at the crestfallen expression on his sensei's face. Clearly this was a point of annoyance. That didn't help, Minato muttered, but then Jiraiya-sensei gave me a twin popsicle. When he split the popsicle, it made me realize that since they're both essentially the same, it didn't matter which popsicle I got. Similarly, it didn't matter which direction, rather, I needed to need the chakra in both directions simultaneously. That's when I finally completed the base form of the Rasengan. Let me get this straight, Kakashi interjected with disbelief. You're telling me that the ultimate shape manipulation jutsu was inspired by a combination of tailed beasts, the whorls of your head and a popsicle. He didn't even bother to hide the incredulity in his voice. He was sure that even his younger self would have been thrown off at the revelation, stoicism or not. Yes, Minato chuckled nervously. Rasengan's original name is Ice Pop-inspired Nimbus Jiraiya Twin Whorl Sphere. Kakashi visibly sweat dropped. Maybe leave that part out when you tell the story. I respect you a lot, sensei, but I'm finding it hard not to judge you harshly right now. Minato startled at the off-brand comment from his serious student, but then laughed out loud. Well noted. So did it work against a tailed beast bomb? Kakashi asked curiously. I never got the chance to test it out against a Jinchuriki again, Minato said, but Kakashi observed the minuscule signs of lying. He determined that whatever the full truth was, it had to do with Kushina. To spare his sensei, Kakashi avoided a follow-up and brought the conversation back to the technique. Back to nature manipulation, Kakashi redirected. Did the tailed beast bomb have a nature element that matches the tailed beast? No, Minato shook his head, but imagine how strong it can be with the addition of nature. To answer your original question, I already got to the intended effect I originally strived for with base Rasengan. Now I want to take it to the next step. I don't know if it's possible to add nature manipulation to it, but if it is, the outcome would be devastating. I think that helps, Kakashi mused, bringing a hand under his chin in thought. This was his chance to give his sensei a hint as his story reminded him of Naruto's solution to look two ways at the same time. Two whorls, that's a curious idea. What do you mean? Minato titled his head lightly. You have to do two things at the same time, Kakashi mumbled, thinking how Naruto needed a clone to swirl his chakra in two ways, then a third to add nature manipulation. Adding nature manipulation will be like trying to do three things at the same time. You are pushing the limit with the Rasengan by doing two things at once. Is it in any way possible for one person to do three things at the same time? Interesting line of thought. Minato's eye sparkled in excitement. The question isn't whether adding nature manipulation to the Rasengan is possible. The question is how I can split my focus to doing two advanced skills simultaneously. Could sealing be the solution? Is there a way to seal manipulation? Or maybe there's a way to contain Rasengan's form long enough to focus on nature manipulation. I can already think of different things to try. The moment of truth arrived. Or a shadow clone, Kakashi supplied casually. It was instantaneous. The widening of the eyes. The slightly open mouth. The metaphorical light bulb switched on. That's it. Minato was ecstatic and then grabbed his student by the shoulders. Kakashi, you're a genius. Kakashi simply shrugged, not feeling that he was worthy of the praise. Sure, he gave Naruto the same tip, but it felt like cheating, building to this moment with his future knowledge. It didn't matter though, they were ninja. The most important thing is for the team to grow stronger. Minato is Kakashi's hope for the future of Konoha and Naruto's happiness. The stronger he was, the better. This time around, the fourth Hokage will be the one to guide the ninja world to a better future. Minato's exclamation attracted the attention of Rin and Obito. They gave each other confused looks before trudging over. The shadow clone can build the Rasengan and I can experiment with mixing the nature element, Minato was saying. Who knows, with the knowledge transfer ability of shadow clones, mixing nature with the Rasengan might become second nature to the point where you won't even need a clone. What's wrong, sensei? Obito asked in confusion, his face scrunched up in worry as he and Rin approached. He had an epiphany, Kakashi shrugged. About what? Rin asked curiously despite breathing heavily, her face covered in sweat from her stamina training. Kakashi gave me a potential idea to finish the Rasengan, Minato replied, I have to test it out. You don't mind if we wrap up for today? Obito and Rin were still thrown for a loop but dutifully nodded along with Kakashi. Great, see you tomorrow. A cloud of smoke later and their sensei was gone. What the hell, Kakashi? Obito now turned to Kakashi who was rolling up his scroll and resealing his notes away. You know how Minato-sensei is when he gets excited about jutsu. Kakashi gave the Uchiha a bored glance as he got up and dusted himself off. What did you tell him? Rin asked then took a swipe of water to quench her thirst. We were just talking about how the Rasengan is like doing two things at once. Adding nature manipulation would be doing three. It seemed to give him an idea. Kakashi didn't elaborate on all the details. Rin and Obito didn't know much about the technicalities of the Rasengan anyway. It was still beyond their level, so Minato had only taught Kakashi thus far. What do you two want to do? Rin questioned. It's only lunch time. Do we stay here and train? I want to keep going, Obito jumped in. The sooner I master these control exercises the sooner I can learn the Phoenix Fire Sage Jutsu. Kakashi didn't want to spend more time with his team today. He was already emotionally exhausted from having to interact with them pretending nothing was wrong, as little as that was. It was easier with his sensei as he didn't have a guilt complex on top of melancholy. Obito died to protect him whereas Rin used him to commit suicide. It still hurt immensely thinking about it. With Minato, Kakashi knew he wouldn't have been helpful against the Kyuubi, and he wasn't there at the moment of death. Not to mention, Naruto was a daily reminder of his father. Somehow, those factors made it easier to converse with the man. However, seeing Rin's eager face looking at him Kakashi felt torn. He wanted to announce that he was leaving too but was surprised to hear his voice request a spar from Rin. Minato-sensei told me he wanted me to have a light taijutsu spar with you, Rin. Rin's eyes lit up and all Kakashi wanted to do was take it back and run away. I want to spar with Rin-chan. Obito's jealousy distracted Rin and gave Kakashi a chance to take a deep breath. Obito-kun, you just said you wanted to keep working on your chakra control exercises, Rin frowned. That's when I thought we're going to continue solo training, Obito whined. I don't want to be during boring chakra control exercises while you have fun sparring. You need to sort out your priorities, Rin scolded him. When Obito's face fell, Rin sighed in sympathy before changing her tone. Obito-kun, how will you be Hokage if you don't train in what will make you stronger? Besides, I'm excited to see the Phoenix Fire Sage Jutsu. Another stab of regret filled Kakashi at Rin's kindness. She really had a big heart and didn't deserve to have that heart obliterated and charred into nothing. The ache only got worse when Obito pumped a fist in the air. Of course, I'm going to learn this jutsu and much cooler fire jutsu. With my fire jutsu and Sharingan I'll protect Konoha as the 5th Hokage. Just wait, Rin-chan. Obito then rushed back to his training spot without a care in the world. But no, Obito didn't become Hokage. Obito was crushed, along with his dreams. Crushed before he could grow up, before he could foster a romance with Rin, before he could enjoy unlocking his Sharingan, all because of him. Are you alright, Kakashi-kun? Rin's concerned voice broke through the haze of his morbid thoughts, and he startled to attention. Sorry, he muttered, got lost in my thoughts. Are you sure? You've been quiet today. Rin still had a worried frown as she searched his face. For what, Kakashi wasn't sure. Stop caring so much, I don't deserve it. I'm fine. He dismissed her instead and moved towards the sparring arena, forcing Rin to follow him and drop the matter. Kakashi used the short walk to collect himself again. It's going to be exhausting if I must sort out my emotions every few minutes. When they made it to the center, Kakashi turned to Rin, devoid of any emotion, and addressed her indifferently. Rules, just taijutsu. The goal of the spar is for you to build your stamina. What about you? Rin asked, surprised Kakashi would help with her training if he didn't receive a training benefit in return. I just recovered from my illness, so Minato-sensei wants me to get some light exercise before I push myself in training. I think it's ridiculous but don't want to get stuck hearing a lecture from him, so it's easier to get it over with, he shrugged. Rin's disappointed gaze at Kakashi's lack of enthusiasm to spar with her hurt. He didn't want to cause her any pain. To avoid any more conversation, Kakashi charged at her, surprising the young ninja who barely managed to jump back to avoid the kick directed at her. Kakashi didn't give her much chance to recover before he dashed forward again, throwing in a few punches that Rin blocked and weaved around. He focused on analyzing his speed and reach, slowly building up the feel of his younger body and improving his timing. Rin was so busy trying to avoid getting hit that she couldn't tell that something was amiss, thinking Kakashi was just holding back. Kakashi recalled the few times he had taijutsu spars with Rin in the past. He had never gone all out either, as the match would be over in seconds if that were the case. Even Obito avoided a full-out taijutsu spar with Rin for the same reason. As they continued to dance around, Rin's defenses started to wane. Kakashi found a gap in Rin's defense and moved to throw in a punch aimed at her lower right abdomen. He was about to connect when an image flashed in his head. Rin, a hole in her chest, blood coming out of her mouth, and eyes wide in shock. Kakashi faltered, opened his hand in a palm and pushed her away instead. Rin stumbled back but didn't fall as Kakashi had reduced the force as much as possible. In retaliation, Rin crouched down and attempted to swipe Kakashi off his feet. Kakashi easily avoided the sweep by flipping forwards. Right punch, low cross block, turn, roundhouse kick. Kakashi. Rin angry, voice enraged. Blink the images away. Dodge, axe kick, left jab, right hook. Kakashi, Kakashi. Reality and dreams merged. Rin's chest bleeding. Jump back, deep breath. Focus on measuring reach. Right punch, 6 centimeters short. Adjust. Backwards flip, 43 centimeters short. Adjust. Dodge, few milliseconds too late. Adjust. His entire focus shifted to the technicalities of his taijutsu. The calculated analysis pushed the images farther and farther away. Kakashi was grateful that Rin seemed to be solely focused on keeping up, that she didn't seem to notice anything wrong in Kakashi's fighting style. They exchanged more kicks and punches, and it wasn't long before Kakashi broke through her cross-arm defense. Rin's hands shot upwards in the air and Kakashi moved in with a horse kick, ready to send her across the field. The kick, aimed at her chest, caused Kakashi to falter again as the images resurfaced and his leg froze right in front of Rin's chest, centimeters away from connecting. Kakashi-kun? Rin asked, her breath ragged but still managing to convey worry as relaxed her stance. He stepped back and lowered his leg. It's nothing. Kakashi sighed as brought his leg back down to the ground and placed his hands in his pockets. You look tired, let's stop. Do you think I'm that weak? You've been stopping short of connecting your hits since the beginning. Rin's concern was replaced by anger. It seemed that Rin caught on more than Kakashi gave her credit for. Rin's anger reminded him of his recurring nightmare, Rin repeating his name over and over again, her anger increasing with each iteration of his name. He barely managed to block the images during the spar. Without the distraction, he could feel his chest tightening and knew he needed to placate Rin and then escape before he broke down in front of her. Well? Rin asked again when Kakashi remained silent. Taijutsu isn't your specialty, he settled on after a beat. Obviously, Rin scoffed, that doesn't mean you have to hold back this much. I can take a few hits. I'm not fragile. You've been neglecting your physical training, Kakashi continued. At this rate, you're going to be a medical ninja confined to the hospital. He bit back a wince at his words, not meaning to be that harsh. However, to ensure that Rin's fate was different, he had to wake her up to reality. Sparring with Rin just brought to the surface how weak her taijutsu was. It was much worse than he recalled, probably since he didn't pay much attention to her skills in the past. It was no wonder she was easily captured during the Kanabi Bridge mission and then by the Mist Ninja. I have low Chunin level taijutsu skills, which is in line with the development of Chunin specializing in medical ninjutsu. Rin was clearly upset. Third clause of the medical ninja laws. No medic ninja shall ever die until they are the last of their platoon. Kakashi repeated the words verbatim. The yellow flashes are sensei, we're only going to be sent on harder and harder missions. If you can't defend yourself, then you'll only end up becoming a liability. Taijutsu is the foundational form of defense. I just want to protect my comrades. Rin bit the bottom of her lip in frustration. I constantly worry about one of you being hurt in a way that I don't know how to treat. I won't forgive myself if that happens. Imagine if we're at the front lines and you heal ninja after ninja as they're carried in from the battlefield. After healing a few, you've exhausted your chakra pool because your physical energy is low. Then, Obito comes in, injured. You know the advanced technique to save his life, but you don't have the chakra to perform the procedure. Is that any better? You just more or less told Obito how he needed to train all his skills, the same applies to you. Rin's eyes quivered and Kakashi was afraid she was going to start crying. He was already emotionally exhausted and wouldn't be able to handle a crying Rin. He needed to escape. Part of him felt guilty for upsetting Rin when all he wanted to do was shelter her. Nonetheless, the logical part of him knew that better upset and determined than happy and dead. I won't let Rin become an easy target again. Rin took a deep breath and then gave Kakashi a nod. You're right. Kakashi nearly gaped at her. That was unexpected. He really underestimated Rin. She was stronger than he ever gave her credit for. He was so used to seeing Rin as someone in need of protection, especially after the promise he made to Obito. It seemed that he needed to reevaluate his perceptions. But Kakashi-kun, there are better ways to say things, honestly. She gave him a small, exasperated smile. Whatever gets the idea across, he shrugged, still a bit put off. That's not how the world works. Rin laughed and Kakashi felt some of the darkness lift from his heart at the sound. I'm going to get back to stamina training. I have some things to think about and am not in the right headspace to spar again. Okay, I'm going to leave then, Kakashi replied succinctly, not trusting himself to say much more. He could finally leave. He raised his hands into the familiar seal of the body flicker jutsu and barely heard Rin thank him before he puffed away, and his apartment materialized. I'm the one that should be thanking you, Rin. Safe in the confines of his apartment, Kakashi closed the curtains and sank to the floor, his back resting at the foot of the bed. He brought up his knees close together, folded his arms to rest on top of them and dug his head inside. A wrangled sob escaped his throat, but he managed to temper it down. He hadn't cried since the fourth Hokage's death. By that point, Kakashi had lost so much that very few things could faze him to the point of tears. Rin. He never truly forgave her for committing suicide by his hand. It had traumatized him greatly. Still haunted his dreams even as an adult. Part of him hated her for that. Yet, talking to her and witnessing her kindness firsthand again, the only feelings that remained were heartache. So friends, this was episode 1 of this incredible time travel adventure. If you enjoyed it and want episode 2 soon, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Also comment down your thoughts. If Kakashi could save only one person first, who should it be, and how do you think the timeline will change? I'll see you in the next episode.